incredible amount of documents on Tupac. And so she did a press conference with Cynthia McKinney to get all the government documents. Now, of course, the Justice Department told me that there's over 4,000 pages in Tupac's FBI file. They weren't supposed to tell me that, but someone slipped with that, and I think it was because she liked Tupac. And so I paid for over 4,000 pages to be copied and sent to me, and they only sent me 99, and they said for national security reasons they weren't giving me the rest, the other 3,900 pages. But so that's where Fanny is when she's, she does some things, but she tries to stay a little away from it all. She told me, that she really wants to know how much she, is thankful for what I'm doing, but she just has to keep a distance so she doesn't get attacked. But Watani Tayihimba, of course, gave me loads of interviews and is very supportive. Merpreem Harding, he calls himself Merpreem Shakur now. He's Matulu's son and Tupac's stepbrother. He said on an interview with me just a few weeks ago that Tupac was a revolutionary, and that's why they killed him. So he's in agreement with the general theory of my book. Yeah.
There's another interview on YouTube I saw too where he directly says he thinks it was cops, and they said, "Do you want to get more specific than that? Do you have any proof?" And he said, "If I did, and I was speaking about it, I'd be in jail." And he just left it at that. I mean, that is it's pretty definitive,
Right.
From his stepbrother. That's If Tupac was alive today, where do you think he would be? What would he be doing? Likely be doing?
Well, I think he would have his own record label because he had obviously already started his own record label, Euthanasia. So he would have been as wealthy, but probably about 5 times as wealthy as Puffy, as P. Diddy, because that's why P. Diddy is so incredibly wealthy, because he's the producer and makes the majority of the money on the records sold, the CDs sold. So he would have been unbelievably wealthy, and he would have been doing some great movies. I'm sure he was doing lots of movies. He would have written some movies because he had already written one, and he would have been incredibly influential and powerful. And for someone who's such a committed leftist activist to be that powerful, that for the powers that be, it would have been dangerous, because he would have committed his influence, his money, and everything else to making the society better, to me, for the 99%.
Yeah.
So Puff Daddy has the rights to Tupac stuff?
No.
Just his own stuff. He makes an incredible amount off of Biggie's, CDs,
and also other people's music. Yeah,
and other people. He
Puffy
has
is. This is well known about Puff Daddy. I'll say this is that he's well known to put people on his label, and the ones that make a lot of money for his label, he still never pays.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he's notoriously a non-payer of artists for the royalties.
Well, that's too bad. But I think he's to me, he's relatively neutral in all this, because there was an attack on him. There was someone shot at him, and then after that shooting in New York, it came on New York television that the New York City government spent the most money ever to put someone away on gun possession. They tried so hard to put him away on gun possession.
They did too, yeah.
And that was when he was involved with the Hip Hop Summit Action Network.
That's true, too, wasn't it? Yeah, that was the time.
Mm-hmm.
That certainly was.
So that's probably scared him off.
You know what's so weird, too? Like, recently, Anton Beatty is on YouTube. A lot of people probably know him and follow him. I've watched some of his stuff. He's a very good skeptic, very powerful voice, influence. And he kind of gave you a rough time. And I know that, we don't even need to get into it. I don't want to get into it. But basically what I want to ask, he kept saying that Tupac had been political early in his career, went to jail, and then when he came out, he was lowest common denominator, battling with everybody, not a leader, not political. And I kind of thought maybe Anton might be right for a little while. But recently, it's been obvious to me that that's just not true. And especially if you look at what MC Hammer has said and some of the stuff that's even been released, where MC Hammer had a press conference with Snoop Dogg and Tupac, where they were going to start a new political party, they were going to get active, they were going to make change. When you look at Thug Life that he put out, which was a code for street gangs to work together, when he did a summit, it seems like that's all BS. That Tupac was about to become way more political than he ever had. Is that? Am I right on that? Like, what do you say to that criticism?
Yeah, well, Anton Beatty is slightly right, but all that you said is certainly correct and true. What happened was when Tupac was in prison, they used something called penal coercion, and Amnesty International cited penal coercion as the closest thing the government had to brainwashing. I think they actually have something that's closer to brainwashing, but nonetheless, the penal coercion tactics that they list, Amnesty International listed, that are being used in U.S. prisons. I showed how every single one of those tactics of penal coercion was used against Tupac. And what that does is they use those penal coercion tactics against activists to mess up their minds so that they can't be as effective of activists. So Tupac Shakur, for example, he was in solitary confinement for 10 hours, 11 months. That's 23 and a half hours a day with just 4 walls all around you in this tiny cell. And that really messes up your mind when you're in that. I mean, it doesn't matter how strong your mind is, how committed you are, it's going to mess your mind up. But the other tactics they use have been proven to mess prisoners' minds up. And they used them all, against Tupac. And so I show that that Death Row Records continued some of those penal coercion tactics when Tupac got out of prison to keep triggering some PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder in Tupac. So I don't think he was at his best, and I think he was running scared, and he knew he told Watani Taihimbe, he cried on his shoulder saying, "I know I'm selling my soul to the devil by signing with Death Row." Because Watani had to disconnect himself and his whole New African People's Organization from Tupac at that point out of fear for what Death Row really was, and fear of all this stuff going on in Death Row, all this drug trafficking and other illegal stuff going on in there from taking his organization down with it. So Death Row did cause Tupac to write his most negative lyrics. For that next album, All Eyes on Me. I'm sorry, not All Eyes on Me. I mean, All Eyes on Me.
That's the first.
And then finally, the last album, Tupac started getting back to his political lyrics. Like, of course, White Man's World is obviously a very political song. Against All Odds says, Haitian Jack and James and Jimmy Henchman knew you were working for the Feds, meaning the Federal Bureau of Investigation, when you set me up and wet me up, meaning had me shot. So then obviously his last album got political again. But he was running a little scared. He wasn't acting himself, for the 11 months when he was out of jail until he was killed. But at the same time, behind the scenes, he was trying to do things again. He was meeting with Sonika Shakur, Monster Cody Scott, the acclaimed author of the book Monster, the memoir about going from gang leader to socialist. So he was doing the things you just said, with Snoop Dogg, speaking at events. I got a picture of him speaking at an activist event with Snoop Dogg right behind him, and of course with meeting with other activists. So Anton Beatty's slightly right, but everything you said is more right, and what I'm talking about with the other work is very important, because he was getting the Bloods and Crips to call peace truces and start turning on to activism all around California, and it was spreading nationwide, and that was a huge threat to